Good vach, Shavua Tov, a good week to you. It was a Shabbos song, so for a moment I wanted to say good Shabbos. Good vach, everybody. It's a good week to you. We're starting our week off right on a Saturday night with some beautiful learning. It's great to be with you. That song is called Nigun Hasulam from Shlomo Katz. Let's light up the darkness. And it's from his album, Likrat Shabbos. Okay. Where are we? Who's with us on a Saturday night as we get the week started off right? Michelle saying shalom, shalom. Melissa in Great Neck. Florence saying good morning from Italy. Welcome, Florence. And Miriam from Hayden, Colorado. Over there on the YouTube side, Lynn checking in from North Texas with a Shavua Tov. And she says, I can answer the question in the title. So you probably already read the daf. All right, we have a colorful page. We're going to finish, with God's help, our discussion of Mishna number 3 here in chapter 10. And then we're going to open and close Mishna number 4 and open Mishna number 5. And then we're actually very near the end of chapter 10. Tonight's daf is Tzadi Vav, page 96, here in Tractate Yevamos, the 14th volume of the Talmud. Just here. All right. And a big Yasher Koach, may you be strengthened. All the people on the East Coast of America, amazing. I mean, for you, it's 1:45 in the morning. If you're learning at this hour, my hat's off to you. Kol hakavod. Okay. So let's just pick it up with a halacha, a law that we learn at the bottom of page 95b. Rather than sort of resume the whole thing, I'll just read the halacha as it ended up from the notes here in the Koran Talmud. If a man's wife and brother-in-law went overseas and people came and told him that they were both dead, his wife and his wife's sister's husband, and after that, he married his wife's sister. He was told his wife is dead, so now he's able to marry his sister, which would be prohibited as long as his wife is alive, even if she's his ex-wife. And his wife's sister was free to marry him because her husband died on that same business trip. The report came that both of them had died, and then it's going to turn out that the witnesses were wrong. They come back. And people came and told him that they were both dead. And after that, he married his wife's sister. And then the missing pair arrived. And his wife's sister, so in that case, his wife's sister requires a bill of divorce from him in any case, whether she married based on the testimony of one witness or two. And she is forbidden to the brother-in-law, meaning to her own husband, to her first husband. So she's going to be forbidden to both her second husband, which was this guy who was told that his wife and his brother-in-law had died. He marries the sister. She is a woman who relied on the testimony, as we've heard, whether from one witness or two, that her husband had died, and then she marries her brother-in-law as not as a yavam. She just marries him. And then it turns out, right, that the testimony was wrong. So she gets a bill of divorce from her second husband, and she's going to need one from her first husband because she becomes prohibited to him. As for the original man that we're talking about, his wife, right, he heard that she was dead, and then he married her sister, and then his wife comes back. She is forbidden to him, whether she was married or betrothed to him. And the reason is that it is unclear whether Shmuel's ruling, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, follows Rabbi Yitzhak Nepacha's explanation or that of Rabbi Ami. And therefore, without going into all of what the rulings were, this is what's interesting about this halacha, because it was unclear whether the law follows one explanation or the other. What did they do? They adopted the stringencies of both opinions. In other words, there is a concern that the betrothal might have been conditional, as stated by Rabbi Yitzhak Nepacha, and therefore he is forbidden to his betrothed either way. And the law is also stringent with regard to a wife who married on the basis of one witness, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Ami. Tragic situation all around based on that hypothetical laid out here in Mishnah number 3. I'm going to skip a couple of paragraphs, and now we're at near the top of 96a. So, as Rav said about this dispute, she is like a married woman, and she is therefore disqualified by licentious sexual relations. So here we're talking about a situation where there is a woman awaiting yibum. So she is a yavama, right? So a widow of a man who died childless and left a brother. And so she has a levirate obligation with her yavam. And until she either marries him in a situation of yibum, or they perform chalitza so that they're released from each other, until then, they have this levirate obligation. If during that period, when she's obligated to her brother-in-law, her yavam, she goes and has sexual relations with some other man, she then is going to become prohibited to her yavam. Right? So as Rav said, she is like a married woman. She's not married to the yavam. She will be if they perform yibum. That hasn't happened yet, but it's like she's married in the sense that she's prohibited to other men during that period. So as Rav said, she is like a married woman, and she is therefore disqualified by her licentious sexual relations. And Shmuel said that she is not like a married woman, and is not disqualified by licentious sexual relations. And alternatively, one can explain that Rav and Shmuel disagree with regard to the issue of whether betrothal takes effect with a yevama. As Rav said, she is like a married woman with regard to all men other than her yavam, and therefore betrothal performed by anyone else does not take effect with her. Right? She's at this point awaiting yibum or chalitza with her yavam. So one question is, what if she has sex with another man? Is she now going to become prohibited to her yavam? Different question. Can she betroth another man? No, right? She is not free to get married or betrothed to some other guy while she's awaiting chalitza or yibum. As we saw, there's a possibility of a conditional betrothal that some other guy says, I will betroth you on condition that you perform chalitza with your yavam, the ceremony that releases her from the levirate obligation to marry her brother-in-law after her husband died childless. Maybe a conditional betrothal, but at this moment, the betrothal itself is prohibited. Let me just make sure I am where I am. Okay. And Shmuel said that she is not like a married woman and is not disqualified by licentious sexual relations. And alternatively, one can explain that Rav and Shmuel disagree with regard to the issue of whether betrothal takes effect with a yevama. As Rav said, she is like a married woman with regard to all other men than her yavam, and therefore betrothal performed by anyone else does not take effect with her. But Shmuel said she is not like a married woman, and this means that betrothal does take effect with her, meaning that she couldn't then just leave the yavam without chalitza or, obviously not yibum anymore, but without chalitza now that she's betrothed some other guy, but rather that betrothal with some other guy, which is prohibited, but takes effect enough that she's going to require a get, a bill of divorce from that other guy before she goes and gets the chalitza or yibum with her yavam. Now the Gemara asks with regard to this last answer, How can the dispute be explained in this manner? But Rav and Shmuel already disagreed over this once. The sages would certainly not record the same dispute twice, and the Gemara answers, it is possible that they did not in fact disagree twice with regard to the same case. Rather, one ruling was stated by inference from the other. In other words, their dispute was recorded in two different ways, and the second time by inference from their original dispute. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 3. Now we go to Mishnah number 4, and this is one of those beautiful Talmudic cases that, obviously is a hypothetical, and it's the kind of hypothetical that's just never going to come up in the real world because it's so intricate. Why was it posed? So that we can test our understanding. So the sages could test their understanding of the law and explain how we would deal with this kind of situation. Just re-emphasizing that, the sages don't spend a lot of time spending these liminal cases, difficult cases, crazy cases, cases that involve, situations that would be so inappropriate and uncomfortable in the real world because they want to dwell on these difficult and emotionally challenging topics, but rather because they're legal challenges, trying to understand, what would be the law in such a situation so that we really understand the law that we can apply to more standard situations. All right, Mishnah number 4 here in chapter 10 of Tractate Yevamos. Witnesses came and said to a husband, your wife is dead, right? So she was somewhere else and she died. And so what did he do? He married her paternal sister, right? So his wife was the child of a man who had, a marriage and then another marriage, or he had 2 wives. And somehow he had 2 wives. In ancient times, he could have had 2 wives simultaneously, or they might have been sequentially, right? But at any rate, this woman had a sister who had the same dad as her, but not the same mom, right? A paternal sister. So now this man who is told that his wife died, he goes and marries her paternal sister. Why can he do that? Because his wife died, right? Even a half-sister follows the same rule that you cannot marry your wife's sister as long as your wife is alive. Even if you're divorced, you can't marry your sister while your wife is alive, even if she's your ex-wife. Okay, but he was told that she was dead, and it's witnesses, so he properly relied on the testimony of 2 witnesses that his wife had died, I guess while overseas, and he married her paternal sister. And then witnesses subsequently told him that his second wife was dead, and he married his second wife's maternal sister. Right? This is a woman who has a sister. These 2 sisters have the same mom, but different dads. Why is this important? Because his first wife died, he marries her paternal sister. His second wife dies, he marries her maternal sister. So the first and third wives are not related to each other at all, right? They don't have, no kind of same parents. They're just both half sisters to a common woman, the second wife, but they're not related to each other at all. That's the key here. And so his second wife was dead, and he married her maternal sister. And after that, witnesses came and said that this one too was dead. His third wife had died, and he married her paternal sister, right? So the second and fourth wives are not related to each other at all. They're just half-sisters to the third wife. And finally, witnesses came and told him that the fourth wife was dead, and he married the last woman's maternal sister. Okay, so he's had 5 wives, each a half-sister to the previous wife, meaning that the first and third sisters are not related to each other at all. The third and fifth, wives. The first and third wives not related to each other at all. The third and fifth wives not related to each other at all. The second and fourth wives not related to each other at all. And each just a half-sister to the previous wife and the subsequent wife. All right, we get the picture. And so finally they told him that the fifth wife was dead, and then they were all discovered to be alive, right? You see, it's a crazy situation that's obviously not happening in the real world. But 5 times this guy married and was told that or at least 4 times, that, his wife had gone away on a trip and she was dead and he married her half-sister. Okay, so in this crazy, obviously unlikely scenario, then what? That's the question. Then what? Okay, they were all discovered to be alive. In this case, he is permitted to his first wife and to the third and the fifth, right? A man can have more than one wife, so he's permitted to 3 of them. Why those 3? Because they're not related to each other. You can't be married to a woman and her sister. So these wives are not each other's sisters, but the second and fourth wives, yes, they are half-sisters to the ones that are permitted to him. So they are prohibited to him. He has to divorce them. Since the first, third, and fifth wives are not sisters, his betrothal to them is effective. Consequently, if he died and one of them entered into yibum with his brother, they exempt their rival wives, right? This man has multiple wives. Once he found out that the previous ones were dead, they're still his wives. It's just that the second and fourth he has to divorce because they're sisters of his other wives, but the first, third, and fifth are his wives. If he dies, now he leaves 3 wives who are all co-wives of each other. And what do we learn at the very beginning of Tractate Yevamos? If a man dies, childless, right, and he leaves, let's say, or in this case, 3 wives, and he has a brother, so his brother has to perform yibum or chalitza with one of them. And then the other 2 are exempt. They're free to go and marry whoever they want. But he is forbidden to the second and fourth wife, each of whom is the sister of his original wife. Therefore, if he passed away and the Yavam had relations with one of them, his relations with any one of them does not exempt her rival wife, as she was forbidden to his brother, which means that there was no mitzvah of levirate marriage here at all, right? So the second and fourth wives, if they haven't been divorced already, when he dies, they're prohibited to be his wives. So his Yavam, his brother, his surviving brother, should not perform yibum or chalitza with the second or fourth wife. And if he did, he has accomplished nothing at all. He still has to do yibum or chalitza with one of the 3 permitted wives. And if he had relations with the second woman in the aforementioned list, after the death of the first, i.e. the first one indeed died, but the other rumors were all false, in that case, the husband is permitted to the second and fourth wives, who are his lawful wives, and they exempt their rival wives if he dies and his brother-in-law performs yibum with one of them. And he is forbidden to the third and fifth, right? So if the first wife genuinely died, then the second wife was the first legitimate wife, and so she's not related to the fourth wife, and therefore they can remain as wives. But the third and fifth wives are half-sisters of his permitted wives. They're prohibited to him. If he dies, his surviving brother cannot perform yibum or chalitza with the third and fifth wife. The Mishnah also addresses a different issue. If a boy aged 9 years and 1 day had relations with his Yevama, he thereby disqualifies his brothers from levirate marriage. Now, when we get into a case like this, it's not that in any way the Talmud is, allowing marriage to a 9-year-old boy. It's not. In fact, it says that marriage or sex with a 9-year-old boy is prohibited. What it's asking is the act of having marital relations with this 9-year-old boy or 9 years old in 1 day actually considered sex at all, which would have consequences in a yibum situation. We're not addressing the fact that, first of all, under the law of the land, this is rape, of a child, and the person should go to prison. That's a separate issue. This isn't a criminal law question right here. What's being asked is, does the marital relations with this boy create, is it valid as yibum? Does it disqualify his older brothers who are adults from having chalitza or yibum with a yevama? That's the questions that they're asking here. So if a boy aged 9 years and 1 day had relations with his Yevama, right? So he's the younger brother, the surviving brother of a man who died childless and left a widow. So if this boy aged 9 years and 1 day had relations with her, he thereby disqualifies his brothers from performing Yibum with her, despite the fact that as a minor, he has not acquired the Yevama as his wife through this act of intercourse. And the brothers likewise disqualify the woman from him if they have intercourse with her. However, there's a difference between them, as he disqualifies his brothers only if he engaged in sexual relations with her first, and the brothers disqualify him whether they had relations with her before or after him. And the Mishnah explains, how so? A boy aged 9 years and 1 day who had relations with his Yevama has disqualified his brothers, as they are no longer eligible to marry her, because only one brother, if there's multiple brothers, only one of them performs either yibum or chalitza, and then all the other brothers are disqualified from getting involved. In this case, even though he's a minor, he had sexual relations with her, and that's going to disqualify his brothers. If his brothers had relations with her, or performed levirate betrothal with her, or gave her a bill of divorce, or performed chalitza with her, they permanently disqualify him from engaging in relations with her. Why they put it that way? Because the minor cannot betroth a woman, cannot give her a bill of divorce, and cannot perform chalitza with her. The only way for him to get involved at all is to have actual sexual relations with her. This is prohibited, but what they're asking is, okay, it's prohibited, but what if they did it? Then what? And so the only act that he could do that has any significance at all would be the sexual relations. Creating legal documents with her would have no significance whatsoever. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. The Mishnah states, and if he had relations with the second after the death of the first, back to the case of the man who had 5 wives, each the half-sister of the next, maternal, then paternal, etc. And if he had relations with the second wife after the death of the first, the Gemara asks, is that to say that all of them, all the other cases in the Mishnah, are not dealing with a situation after the death of the first woman? The entire case starts with the report, your wife is dead. And Rav Sheshes said, after the definite death of the first one. In other words, the Mishnah means that this did not follow a mere rumor that she was dead, but it was positively established that she had actually died. Now going back to this case of the boy and his effect on the brothers. The Mishnah teaches that a boy aged 9 years and 1 day who had relations with his Yevama has disqualified her from his brothers. Throughout this discussion, whenever the Gemara refers to a 9-year-old boy, it is understood that he is actually 9 years and 1 day old. And the Gemara asks, does a boy aged 9 years and 1 day disqualify her to the brothers only if he had relations with her first? But if he had relations last, she does not disqualify them? Meaning, for example, one of the brothers stepped forward and said, okay, I will marry the Yevama. We're not ready to perform yibum yet, but we're going to have levirate betrothal, right? So which is the correct way to do it. That he has a betrothal with her, and they're going to perform yibum later. But then this, 9-year-old brother somehow steps in and has sex with her. At that point, does he disqualify his brothers from performing yibum with her? So this opinion is only if he has sex first, he disqualifies them. But if he has sex second, after they've done an action, or let's say even they perform yibum, now he doesn't disqualify them. Does a boy age 9 years and 1 day disqualify her to the brothers only if he had relations with her first? But if he had relations last, he does not disqualify? But didn't Rav Zevid bar Rav Oshayas teach one who performs levirate betrothal with his Yevama, and afterward his brother, who is 9 years and 1 day old, had relations with her, he has disqualified her. So this indicates that the intercourse of the 9-year-old disqualifies his brother, even if it occurred after that of his brother. And they say in response, the intercourse of a 9-year-old boy disqualifies his brothers even if it happens last. However, in the case of a boy who merely performed levirate betrothal with her, if he did so first, he disqualifies his brothers, whereas if he did it last, he does not disqualify. And the Gemara asks, and do the sexual relations of a 9-year-old disqualify his brothers even when performed last? But isn't it taught in the Mishnah? However, he disqualifies them only if it was first. And the brothers disqualify him when they were first or last. How so? A boy aged 9 years and 1 day who had relations with his Yevama has disqualified his brothers. The example of the Mishnah this is the example the Mishnah uses for a boy who disqualifies his brothers first, is an act of intercourse. So the Gemara answers, the Mishnah is actually incomplete, and this is what it is teaching. With regard to a boy aged 9 years and 1 day, he disqualifies his brothers first, and they disqualify him first and last. In what case is this statement said? This is said with regard to levirate betrothal. If they perform levirate betrothal with her, However, if the minor had relations with her, he disqualifies them even if he did so last. How so? If a boy aged 9 years and 1 day had relations with his Yevama, after his brother performed levirate betrothal with her, he has disqualified his brothers. And so one thing that you're learning here is that even though it's illegal, it's actually considered a sexual act if he's at least 9 years and 1 day. If he's younger than that, it's like nothing happened. That you could still go to jail for the child molestation and the rape, but it hasn't had consequences in this area of yibum, of levirate marriage. All right, I'm actually going to skip the rest of that discussion, where they're just analyzing which act is significant enough to disqualify the brothers. Now we're skipping just a little bit forward to the top of page 96b, and we're going to discuss Mishnah number 5. This is a very brief Mishnah, and then we're actually going to go into Mishnah number 6. Mishnah number 5. If a boy aged 9 years and 1 day had sexual relations with his Yevama, and afterward his brother, who is also 9 years and 1 day old, had relations with her, the second brother disqualifies her to the first one. And Rabbi Shimon says he does not disqualify her if a minor aged 9 years and 1 day had relations with his Yevama, and afterwards that same boy had relations with her rival wife. He thereby disqualifies her to himself, and both women are now forbidden to him. And Rabbi Shimon says he does not disqualify her. That was Mishnah number 5. I'll just read you what the law is, and then we're going to go to Mishnah number 6. The law came out like this. If a boy, aged 9 years and 1 day, had relations with his Yavam and afterward had intercourse with her rival wife, or if his brother, also 9 years old and 1 day old, had relations with that Yavama, she is disqualified from levirate marriage with the first brother. All of this stuff sounds so impossible to our ear, but, that kind of situation was at work in the case of Judah, right? His sons, who had both been married to Tamar, right? Er and Onan, and Er died and didn't have a child. So the next brother, Onan, stepped in, and he did what was wrong in the eyes of the Lord and didn't want to make her pregnant and produce a child that would be an heir to his older brother who had died, Er, an heir to Er, E-R. And so he spilled his seed on the ground, and that displeased the Lord, and then Onan died. Now, there was a third brother who at that time was a child, a young child. So did they send him forward, to perform one of these actions? No, they held him back, and they said maybe when he grows up. And so Tamar was waiting for the boy to grow up. But after he grew up, they still weren't sending him to her because they were afraid that she's unlucky and she's a woman whose husbands die, right? And that's when they, she had done nothing wrong and was getting the short end of the stick and wasn't being sustained by the family. And eventually, the whole story comes out where Judah ends up himself marrying Tamar, stepping in. Now, that we don't have, levirate marriage, where a father steps in and marries the widow of his son, but that all happened before the Torah was given. Okay, Mishnah number 6. And this is kind of a similar subject, but we're going to end up in a very colorful story, not so much on the content of these laws about yibum, but how the sages argued about it and how Rabbi Yochanan became furious with Rabbi Elazar. All right, Mishnah number 6. If a boy aged 9 years and 1 day had relations with his Yevama and then he died, so that Yevama performs chalitza and may not enter into yibum. If the minor married a woman in a regular manner and then he died, she is exempt from levirate marriage and chalitza, as by Torah law, a minor cannot marry. Got it? Right? So what we're talking about is what are the consequences in the law of yibum when a minor steps in and does what he is prohibited to do. And it's prohibited to have him do for the adults to allow this. But if it happened, right, so a minor cannot marry an adult in this situation, but he will have consequences in whether yibum or chalitza can be performed afterward. If a boy aged 9 years and 1 day had relations with his Yevama, and after he matured and he married a different woman, and then he died childless, well, if he did not carnally know the first woman after he matured, but only when he was a minor, So then the first one performs chalitza and may not enter into levirate marriage, as she is in essence a Yevama who had relations with a minor. And the second woman either performs chalitza or enters into yibum, as she is his full-fledged wife, right? He married one when he was a minor and one when he was an adult. So the one that he married when he was a minor is only eligible for chalitza. His wife that he married when he was an adult is eligible for yibum. Rabbi Shimon says the brother consummates levirate marriage, yibum, with whichever woman he chooses, and performs chalitza with the second one. And the Mishnah comments, this is the law both for a boy who is 9 years and 1 day old, and also for one who is 20 years old, but he is physically incapable of fathering children. He is still, he's sexually underdeveloped. So he never had the opportunity, he had never had the possibility of fathering children. Now the Gemara. If a brother performed levirate betrothal with a Yevama and died, she has a levirate bond in relation to the remaining brothers from two deceased brothers. So Rava said, with regard to that which the rabbi said, that when a bond of two Yevamim, right, there's two surviving brothers, exists, so she performs chalitza and she does not enter into yibum. And you should not say that this applies only when there is a rival wife, as there is reason to decree due to a rival wife. The suggestion is that as the rival wife, if there was two wives, as the rival wife can enter into yibum by Torah law, if the woman who performed levirate betrothal with the second brother was also permitted into levirate marriage, people might mistakenly permit levirate marriage to two rival wives from the same family, right? You might think that if a man died and he left two wives and he had two brothers, that if they wanted to, the two brothers could marry the two wives. But we know that this is not so. Only one of the wives can be married in yibum or chalitza, and the other one just goes free. Because there's two brothers here or more, they're saying that, okay, one performs yibum, the other performs chalitza, the other brother performs chalitza because it's possible that there was two bonds. And the proof that this is not the case is that here in the first clause of the Mishnah, there is no rival wife, as it is referring to one woman, which means that this Yevama who had relations with the 9-year-old is tied by the bonds of both her first husband and the underage Yavam, whose intercourse is like levirate betrothal, and even so, she performs chalitza, but she does not enter into yibum. The Mishnah teaches that if a 9-year-old boy married a woman and then he died, she is exempt from yibum and chalitza because the marriage was not real. The Gemara comments, we already learned this, as the sages taught in a Baraisa with regard to an imbecile and a minor who married women and died. Their wives are exempt from chalitza and from yibum, as the marriage of a minor or an imbecile is of no account. The Mishnah further teaches the case of a 9-year-old boy who had relations with his Yevama, and after he matured, married another woman. And the Gemara asks, and let the sages at least establish the sexual relations of a 9-year-old to be like the levirate betrothal of an adult, and it would therefore override the requirement of the rival wife to enter into yibum, in accordance with the law of the rival wife of a woman who has the bond of two Yevamim. She has two brothers-in-law. And Rav said they did not establish that the intercourse of a 9-year-old boy is like the levirate betrothal of an adult in all regards. And Shmuel said, yes, they did. And similarly, Rabbi Yochanan said, they certainly did. Now, I'm just going to skip a couple of paragraphs because it's just more complicated stuff about that law. And now let's get to what I think is more interesting, is why Rabbi Yochanan became angry. So Rabbi Yochanan said, yes, they did, right? That this law of the minor is like sex with the minor has the same consequences in the realm of levirate marriage law as levirate betrothal. Rabbi Elazar went and said this law in the study hall, but he did not state it in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Instead, he issued the law without attribution. Rabbi Yochanan heard that his student Rabbi Elazar omitted mention of his name, and he became angry. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi visited Rabbi Yochanan to placate him so that he would not be annoyed with his beloved disciple. And we should recall at this point, it doesn't say it here, but we've seen it elsewhere in the Talmud, that you do not want to anger a sage, right? Like genuine sages of the Mishnah, of the Gemara. They were functioning at such a high level that If they gave you the stink eye, like they looked at you in true anger and God forbid cursed you, your life would be shortened. I mean, they had that power. So now that Rabbi Yochanan is furious with Rabbi Elazar's friends go to see Rabbi Yochanan and try to placate him. And they said to him, wasn't there an incident in the synagogue of Tiberias, involving a bolt that secures a door in place that has a thick knob? It's called a gelustera. It has a thick knob on the end. And the question was whether it may be moved on Shabbos as a vessel or whether it is considered muktzah as raw material. Right? On Shabbos, you're not allowed to even touch things that are only used for construction or for the work of the week. You could move it, like in a kind of changed manner, like hold it like not the way you'd normally hold it, if you just need its place, just to get it out of the way, if it's a muktzah object. But if it's a vessel, right, if it has a permitted use on Shabbos, then you can just pick it up and move it in the regular way. So that was the question of law under discussion in that synagogue in Tiberia. And it was stated that Rabbi Elazar, the same Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Yosei argued over this case until they became so upset with each other that they tore a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll, in their anger. The Gemara interrupts the account to clarify exactly what happened. Tore? Can it enter your mind that such great sages would intentionally tear a Torah scroll? Rather, you must say that a Torah scroll was torn through their anger. It's not like they freaked out and tore a Torah to demonstrate how angry they were. Rather, in the heat of their debate, they pulled the scroll from one side to another until it tore. And Rabbi Yosei ben Kizma, who was there at the time, said, I would be surprised if this synagogue does not become a place of idolatrous worship. This unfortunate event is a sign that this location is unsuitable for a synagogue, and indeed, this eventually occurred. So Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi cited this story to hint to Rabbi Yochanan how careful one must be to avoid becoming angry, and particularly with another sage, a colleague. However, Rabbi Yochanan grew even angrier, saying, you are even making us colleagues now? Right? The original Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yosei in the story, they were colleagues. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar are teacher and student. So Rabbi Yochanan said, he was supposed to teach that in my name. I'm angry that he didn't do that. You're trying to placate me by telling me a story about how two colleagues became angry with each other, and you're going to compare that to my situation where my student is disrespecting me? Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi visited Rabbi Yochanan in an attempt to placate him and said to him, the verse states in Joshua 11:15, as God commanded his servant Moses, so did Moses command Joshua. And so did Joshua. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord commanded Moses. Now, did Joshua, with regard to every matter that he said to the children of Israel as he led them into the promised land after wandering in the desert for 40 years, did he, every time he told them to do something, always preface it by saying to them, thus Moses said to me? No. Rather, Joshua would sit and teach Torah without attributing his statements, and everyone would know that it was the Torah of Moses. Obviously, anything that Joshua knew, he learned from his teacher, from Moses. So too, your disciple Rabbi Elazar sits and teaches without attribution, because everyone knows that his teaching is from your instruction, Rabbi Yochanan. And hearing this, Rabbi Yochanan was appeased. Later, after calming down, he said to Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi, why don't you know how to appease me like your colleague Ben Idi? And the Gemara asks, and Rabbi Yochanan, what is the reason he was so angry about this matter? And the Gemara answers that this is as Rabbi Yehuda said that Rav said. What is the meaning of that which is written? Psalms 61 verse 5, I will dwell in your tent in worlds. meaning literally forever, right? When we talk about olamim, the plural worlds means like this world and the next world. So it's a phrase that means forever. So I will dwell in your tent forever. What does this mean? And is it possible for a person to live in two worlds simultaneously, right? You could say, oh, I will live in this world and then my soul will go to the next world. But can a person live in both worlds simultaneously? So they're not saying it usually means forever, but now they're saying, but it literally means worlds. So can a person live in this world and the next world at the same time? Rather, David, King David, said before the Holy One, blessed be he, Master of the universe, let it be your will. And I'm almost done, so if you have questions or comments, get them in. Let it be your will that they will say a matter of halacha, of law, in my name in this world when I have passed on to another world. Right? That's what David was saying in Psalm 61. So as Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, with regard to any Torah scholar in whose name a matter of halacha is said in this world, his lips mouth the words in the grave as though he is talking. Right? So in other words, when you give a teaching in the name of somebody that you learned it from, who's now gone from this world, it's as if the dead one is speaking in this world. It's as if his mouth is moving in the grave. But it's not that his mouth is, literally moving in the grave. Maybe it is, but lyrically, spiritually speaking, what we're saying is his mouth is still talking in this world because I'm giving over a teaching in his name. So Rabbi Yitzhak ben Zera said, and some say this was stated by Shimon the Nazarite, what is the verse from which it is derived? And this is from Song of Songs 7:10. And the roof of your mouth is like the best wine that glides down smoothly for my beloved, moving gently the lips of those who are asleep. And he explains, this is like a pile of grapes left to warm before they are pressed. Just as in the case of a pile of grapes, when a person places his finger on it, immediately it moves, as the wine bursts through and the whole pile shakes. So too with Torah scholars, when a teaching is said in their name in this world, their lips mouth the words in the grave. And for this reason, Rabbi Yochanan wanted his Torah statements to be attributed to him so that he would continue to have life in this world even after he left this world. And that's what we've got tonight. So let's check if we've got comments or questions. Okay. On Yevamos, page 96. Just take off this jacket. Got hot in here. Okay. And Nina's saying, okay, no questions, but she really enjoyed the story about Rabbi Yochanan. Wonderful. Okay, my friends, that's what I've got for us tonight. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Sunday night, the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. And then reminder, no class Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we'll resume on Thursday because Nina and I are going away on a little 20th anniversary trip. But we do have class tomorrow, Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night and a great week. Good Vach, Shavua Tov.